Well, and I've heard stories of game wardens that can just walk up and cut the lock off of a gate as if they do that willy nilly. So I mean, technically you could.
Technically, I could, but I've done that one time in my career, and that was a life and death situation.
Welcome to Hey Chaplain. My name is Jared Altick, and I'm a chaplain with the police department. I believe that cops deserve more encouragement, and I want to help the officers who have wisdom to share to get that life-saving and career-changing support to their brothers and sisters in blue. In this podcast, you'll hear from detectives and dispatchers, U.S. Marshals and county sheriffs, and the occasional SWAT team member. From the LAPD to Scotland Yard, the guests on Hey Chaplain are sharing their wisdom and experience so that you don't have to do everything the hard way. This show is free for everyone because of those supporters who are quietly helping behind the scenes. If you want to help this show reach cops and chaplains and other first responders around the world, please consider making a $5 donation by following the link in the episode description. I've been impressed by the wide variety of jobs in law enforcement, and I delight in uncovering forgotten corners of this profession. Perhaps to remind you that changing jobs doesn't necessarily mean hanging up the badge. Today I'm talking to Scott Robertson, a game warden from the forests and swampy lakes of East Texas. Scott's daily patrols look a lot different from what I see in urban Kansas City, but there's also a lot of similarities. I want you to hear the pros and cons of this kind of work, but I especially want you to hear the wisdom that Scott has gleaned from it. Here's Scott Robertson. Hello, Scott. How are you today?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to have you on the show. Very interested. You are the first game warden that I've ever had on the show. And so can you tell me what it's like to be a game warden in East Texas? What does that job entail?
That is a wide open job description, and I wear many hats every day. So first and foremost, we're state police officers in Texas. We take the same licensure test that a state trooper, a sheriff's deputy, a municipal police department constable, like we take the same licensure test that they do. It's called the TCOL, the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement Standards testing. But in our academy, we focus on all of that, but then we focus on wildlife code and wildlife crimes. Public safety is number one, and then we focus on the wildlife crimes and boating safety, hunting safety, search and rescue, land and water, flood response, any kind of hazardous response. I mean, you name it, we've got somebody out there that'll do it.
So I'm sure historically you can think back to game preserves, probably back in England, that had gamekeepers that were there to prevent poaching. Is that primarily where game wardens came from in the United States?
Yes, sir. I think that's where the idea came from. Because historically, there was lots of game and heavy commercialization of that as our nation was forming, and so in the late 1890s, early 1900s, started with the Texas Game, Fish, and Oyster Commission, and then blossomed into Texas Parks and Wildlife as we know it now. So okay. I don't want to get the year wrong.
So you're definitely going out and making sure that people are not illegally going over their limit in the number of animals that they harvest. But there's probably more to it than just keeping track of whether or not somebody's up to speed on their deer tag. So where does it go beyond that?
Where our code specifies, where the Texas Parks and Wildlife Code specifies, is that the resources in Texas belong to the people of the state of Texas. And so what that means is that biologists set aside a number of animals, fowl, fish, fur bearers, mammals, etc., for an individual to take. That way, the take isn't more than the population can sustain, and so that's where we come in to make sure. And it's an inspection authority that since that's a public resource, that's how we're able to kind of go in and do what we do where we can do it. Public land, private land, etc. Because fish, public water, they don't stay in one spot. Deer jump fences, birds migrate, and so because of that, our code states that we can go where they
So you have pretty wide-ranging authority to enter onto private land and of course public land and other places to make sure that these regulations are being obeyed. But how much of that is proactive? Are you guys working off of tips? Are you just know that you're going to find hunters and fishers in certain places? Are you how do you direct your day-to-day operations?
So it's very seasonal, but so during hunting season, so just because you see a Texas game warden doesn't mean you've done anything wrong.
Okay.
Right, because a sheriff's deputy or a municipal police officer, they conduct a traffic stop because a violation is committed or there's reasonable suspicion thereof. All we have to have is reasonable suspicion of hunting or fishing activity to enter a property, but we cultivate relationships with landowners, and we actually are agents on their behalf because Texas is 97% privately owned, which means that people own, up to a few acres, up to thousands and thousands. And so when the population puts in work as far as feeding, cultivating the land, growing the animals they're trying to harvest, they don't want somebody poaching. So 9 times out of 10, I'd probably say 95% of the population really are glad that we're there working on their behalf. And so most of what I do here in East Texas is actually trespass and hunting without landowner permission. I'm going in their property on their behalf to stop trespassing and the illegal take of animals off their property.
Is this dangerous work? It seems like you're going to confront people who are all armed.
Yeah. Yes, sir. It's dangerous. I mean, during hunting season, I walk into property with armed people all the time, and it's just me. And so, 2:00 in the morning, a landowner will call me, "Hey, Scott, I just heard a shot off of Blackburn Road." All right, well, I'm on the way. And so I'll get out there, and I know where his property is. I know where the vicinity of the shot came from. So I'll spend a few hours out there, kind of weave in and out of properties or on roads and see what I can find. And then if I find somebody trespassing, then I go confront them.
You are just to the west of Shreveport, Louisiana. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Harrison County, Texas.
What's the topography like there?
So,
what kind of land are we talking about?
It's northeast Texas. We have large population of pine trees. We have oak bottom, oak flats, lots of water, rivers, creeks, and then we have Caddo Lake. So we have lots of water, lots of river bottoms, lots of really thick packed brushy areas.
How much of your job is related to hunting versus fishing?
It's really seasonal. So I mean, as far as when fishing is always going on in Harrison County because of Caddo Lake, so I can always go out and check fishermen. But it's got a unique fish take because it's a border lake with Louisiana, so the numbers are a little bit more relaxed and the size limits are relaxed. So that's not as big of an issue as hunting season is, where that's very heavily regulated.
What's it look like when somebody has done something illegal? If they've taken too many, or if they're using the wrong kind of equipment, or some other infraction? What does that look like? Are they getting arrested? Are they getting a ticket? What does that look like?
Well, it's all circumstantial. So it depends on if it's on a public piece of property, on private. In Texas, private landowners, their rights are supreme. So they get to call the shots. Do they want to file trespassing charges? What type of trespassing? Do they want to get a ticket? Do they want to send them to jail? That's really up to them, because I can regulate the take of the animals, but they get to dictate what happens on their land. And so, you can get a fine all the way up to, in Texas, we have classes. So a Class C misdemeanor is the equivalent of a, stop sign or a speeding ticket, and up to a felony where you could lose your hunting rights for the rest of your life.
Oh, wow.
Depending on severity and take of certain animals and stuff like that. So landowners have a lot of pull and sway when it comes to their property.
What's your most common call in regard to hunting?
Trespass, hands down.
Trespassing. Okay.
Yeah. So, because Northeast Texas is so thick, I mean, somebody could just walk into a brushy, thick area, off a public road, and nobody know they're there until they hear a shot or see a four-wheeler trail or a cut fence.
So, what's your most common call in regard to fishing or boating?
Boating, it would have to be in intoxication offenses. So
Okay.
in Texas, boating while intoxicated is equivalent to driving while intoxicated. And so, but it's different in the fact you can drink on a boat, you can be intoxicated on a boat, you just cannot be intoxicated and drive a boat. And so, with all of that, like this time of year, we're primarily looking for operation of vessels safely and intoxication.
Is there a lot of competition to become a game warden? It seems like this is an outdoor job. This is an interesting job. You're working by yourself out in nature. Do a lot of people want your job?
Yes, it's fairly competitive. It's about a year and a half long process from when you apply to when you graduate. So usually our classes they open for application around September, and the application process is about a year. Just because there's so many steps, you have to do a physical examination, psychological examination, interview board, physical assessment, a very lengthy background investigation to where your background investigator is a field warden. And so they go through every aspect of your life. And the academy usually start, I guess, around October, and they graduate in July. So from September to the following July, that's about the process to become a game warden.
Are most of the applicants, are they prior law enforcement? Are they straight out of college? What's a typical applicant like?
So we really have a wide variety of individuals that apply. So we'll have folks fresh out of college, early 20s. We'll have folks from different law enforcement backgrounds to apply, and then we'll have military individuals who are out or who have prior military service apply. So, and we have a regular old civilian like me who was just working and wanted to do something and give back in his way. We have folks from all walks of life, from different countries that will apply.
Really?
You do have to be a U.S. citizen, but we have a guy from Brazil. We've had a guy from South Africa. We've had folks from Mexico. As soon as they get their citizenship, and they come on and go to work.
How many game wardens are there in the state of Texas?
So field wardens are about 550. And so there's 254 counties in the state of Texas. Not every has two, but around where I am, there's roughly 2 wardens per county. But you get large metroplex areas like Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston. They'll have anywhere from 4 to 8 or 10, depending on water body size and population.
If you need backup, who do you call?
So I have a partner. So there's 2 of us. My county is about 915 square miles. So I've got a partner. Our days off are different, but they're during the week. But our sheriff's office and us, we have a great relationship. For example, so not the current sheriff, but the one before, he was a game warden in this county for 30 years and then retired and became sheriff for 20. So he served his county for 50 years. And then the current sheriff now has been a jailer all the way up through sheriff. He and I spent time on the street together. Have always had a great relationship. And so if they need anything, they call us. If we need something, we call them. And we're a very you catch it, you clean it outfit too. So we don't push we don't push our work off anybody. So if we catch a theft case, we work it. I mean, you name it, we do it. And so
because you are state police officers.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you have authority to do something more than just check how many birds are in your bag. Right.
Right. And being rural area, we run into a lot of narcotics. We run into a lot of theft. And often those two go together. We've got a great relationship with just about everybody here, and Texas Highway Patrol as well.
In Texas, is there a more desirable place to be a game warden than other places? Texas has like arid desert. It has, it has forested areas. It has everything in between. So what's the most desirable part of Texas to be a game warden?
Well, that's really up to the individual. So like I said, we've got folks from all walks of life here, and Texas is very unique. We had very different geographical regions here in Texas. So we have, Piney Woods, Post Oak. If you don't like that, you can drive a few hours to the west and hit central Texas to where it's like hilly, desert, dry. You don't like that, you can go to the real desert, go out to El Paso west. We have Panhandle that, is up near Colorado and Oklahoma, touches that. And you don't like that, you can go to the valley with very heavy Hispanic culture, and lots of African game are down there because the landscape down there is very suitable for just about anything around the world. Texas can handle it. And so you just got to drive a few hours, in a direction, and you can change where you are. And so, we got some folks that move around that have hit every region of the state. Good buddy of mine I talk to all the time, he's been to every region from the Panhandle to the Valley, as opposed to like my sheriff stayed in this county his whole career and then worked for it again. And me, I've been here for 12 years. And so it really just depends on the warden, what they want to see, what they want to do. Do they want to be rural? Do they want to be urban? Do they want to have a mix? So
that's a very diplomatic answer, but do you like your part of the state?
So I was born and raised about an hour from where I am. I love my part of the state here. I've been to different places. I grew up around pine trees and oak trees, and when I go somewhere that's flat and open, I get out of sorts. And so I'm where I am, and I'm home. So I'm just going to stay here.
Yeah, I live in the northeast part of the state of Kansas, and everyone assumes that all of Kansas is flat. And there are large parts of Kansas that are flat farmland. But where I grew up, it was hilly, and we had maybe not forest, but we had timber. So we had wooded areas and lots of water, lots of creeks, lots of lakes. And so my part of Kansas is not what most people picture as the state of Kansas. And so I very much like where I grew up. And I can imagine you feel the same.
Yes, sir.
What's the most unusual, this could only happen to me because I chose to be a game warden kind of experience that you've had?
Oh, man. Well, so I was thinking about that. And so, it would have to be early in my career. Probably the one story that sticks out the most is we had to catch an alligator one time. And, we've caught alligators many times. But this one, we have nuisance trappers around the state that come and do that. But if they present a danger, then we get on it pretty quick. They do train us in the academy, kind of rudimentary to do that. Enough to where hopefully we won't get hurt too bad. And so there was a big alligator in a lady's pond. She was an elderly lady, and her dogs would go up there. The gator would try to get them and her, and so we had to do something. And so we ended up catching it with a few folks, and, we got a rope and put it on there, drug it out. It ended up being 9 feet. And so being the rookie, I think I was only year one out, and they said, all right, you got to jump on it. And what you do is you cover their eyes up and they become docile. So I had to jump on this 9-foot alligator and put a towel over him, hold his mouth shut so my partners could tape him all up. And then we went and relocated him in Caddo Lake. Right. We didn't harm him or anything. And so my partner took a picture of it, and I still have it. I keep it in my favorites on my phone. So that picture, jumping on a dinosaur is something that is surreal. I mean, there's a reason that they have not had to change in the entire time they've been on this planet. Like, they're apex predators. And so I talked about trespassing earlier. So a landowner calls me, and there's a bunch of folks in his pond or fishing around his pond. There's 6 of them and 1 of me. So I go down, and they kind of start getting itchy because they know, we call it the felony stretch. Like in law enforcement, folks know what that is. The felony fidget, the felony stretch. They know something's fixing to happen. So inadvertently, the body starts to, they don't want to get in trouble. So it's a fight or flight response. So I was like, man, this is not going to go well. And so I said, hey, guys, have y'all seen an alligator in this pond? And they just kind of stopped. They said, what do you mean? And this was not the pond we got it out of, but I said, yeah, man, it's mating season, And so they get pretty aggressive, and they start, rolling around. I had to catch one last week. I said, oh, man, whatever. So I whoop out that picture. I showed it to them. There's me sitting on this 9-foot alligator's back, and the gator's way bigger than me and all that. They stopped and said, "Man, what are we going to do?" I said, "Well, we're going to leave this place. Y'all are going to get." And they said, "All right, we ain't going to mess with you." So that's happened twice. That picture has gotten me out of two fights that I'm very certain would have been a bad for me. That's kind of the unique stuff that we deal with.
I've heard a lot of state troopers talk that way because a lot of them work by themselves in almost any state, and backup is several minutes away, and so their communication skills have to be escalated, to keep things from getting out of hand.
Yes, very much so. And then, I guess their thought process was, if he's going to wrestle a dinosaur, like, we don't stand a chance. So I don't.
Right.
I don't know.
Instant street cred. That's
but it
right.
worked. So.
No, that's fantastic. Yeah. So, do you have a favorite animal or fish? I mean, is there like some part of Texas wildlife that you particularly enjoy or have a fondness for?
Man, it would have to be the white-tailed deer.
Really?
Yep. Hunting is such a rich tradition in Texas that they're majestic. Folks, I have a saying, and most folks are good folks until you put a white-tailed deer, a duck in front of them, then they lose their mind. And that is absolutely true. It's just a majestic animal. I think our primal instinct comes out that, hey, we got to hunt, got to go, we got to provide. They're smart. They're just something about them. Like, they're my favorite animal, but I don't mind hunting either. So
yeah. Well, I was going to ask, when you have a day off, do you go hunting or fishing?
Yes, I do. I grew up in the outdoors, grew up in the country, and funnily enough, I've never seen a game warden growing up. I heard about them.
Yeah.
But my great uncle was a game warden after World War II. So always heard stories and stuff like that about him. He was very, very good, but that was a different time, So that was in the 50s, up through 86 is when he retired. But so I grew up very real rural, hunting, fishing, all that. I was always outdoors and never saw a game warden. Was scared to death of them, because you hear the rumors and the horror stories that they're just that were monsters that were going to come and get you and take everything you own. That's what I had. That's what I was wondering about.
There's this fascination. If you're in a barber shop or some other place, it's the corner cafe where all the guys are talking, and there's this fascination, this idea that the authority of a game warden is nearly unlimited, that game wardens, they have the right of way and they have the ultimate authority. Why is there this mystique about game wardens?
So we do have a little more, I guess, leeway than most, in that we can enter private property if we have the reasonable suspicion of hunting or fishing activity. And then we can inspect any kind of vessel or storage, aka cooler, that's commonly used to house game with or without consent. So I'm pretty sure that's where it comes from.
Okay. Where other law enforcement would be held up by not having a warrant,
right?
You have some access that they don't have,
right? But it's got to have, I can't go in a house and look under a bed for dope because there may be fish there, but I can
right.
On a riverbank, I can walk up to a guy, ask for his fishing license, and open his cooler. Like I can.
Okay.
So,
okay. Well, and I've heard stories of game wardens that can just walk up and cut the lock off of a gate, as if they do that willy nilly. So I mean, technically you could.
Technically, I could, but I've done that one time in my career, and that was a life and death situation. There was a missing person, and they were on a river, and they were, it was, like I said, life and death. And usually I'll hop the fence and walk. Like I said, I grew up in the woods, and so I'm not scared of them by any stretch. And so me getting to take a walk in the woods is just a bonus for me. And but at that time, when somebody's life and liberty were at stake, like, I got the lock and we went in, and I called the landowner and I said, "Hey, I'm so sorry," but he's like, "Hey, don't worry about it. You help those folks." So No, we don't willy-nilly cut locks, and we don't willy-nilly like bust down gates or anything like that. Like, you're asking for complaints and problems that way. So
You said you grew up out in the rural areas. Would a city boy be able to do this job?
oh yeah, I mean they do it all the time. Like I said, we hire diverse backgrounds, but typically what happens is those you asked about, is there a more desirable place than another to go? And, typically you end up where you're comfortable with. And so I wanted to come back close to where I'm from, and I got it right out of the academy. And there are majority of folks want to do the same. And so they'll go back to the urban areas where they're from, because contrary to belief, there's lots to do. Because,
Sure.
There's commercial fish houses, there's fishing, there's boating, there are pockets of land that folks can go hunt. So they kind of like, for example, my buddy's in Denton, Texas, which is in the Dallas Metroplex. And he said, man, you'll be surprised. He said, I run into hunting stuff all the time. And he tells me what he runs into, and I'm shocked because I just wouldn't think that those opportunities for folks are there, but they are. And
Right.
So, it's just where you want to go. What are you familiar with? What's your comfort zone? Some folks, are from the city and they want to go to the country, and they go and stay there. So
Right.
But I did a long loop to your question. So yes, in my time off, I do go hunt fishing. I've got two kids, a 15-year-old and a 10-year-old, and they both love the outdoors. And so we go kayaking, we go fishing, we go hunting, hiking. You name it, we do it for the most part.
That's awesome. Do you mind if I ask you a personal question about your family?
Sure.
So I heard that about a year and a half ago, you guys had a house fire.
Yeah.
Can you tell me that story?
Yes. And so it was a lightning strike is what happened. It was a storm. So we're kind of in a very unique area. So we're above, like we're kind of right in the edge of Tornado Alley, when we're right below, I guess, where the hurricanes hit pretty bad. So we get a lot of residual weather where we are. So straight line winds, storms, stuff like that. And that day it was a pretty good rainstorm, thunder, lightning, but it just went like north and south of Marshall. So I thought we were in the clear. Well, my son calls and says, Dad, I just heard a bang, and the house caught on fire. So it was a lightning strike. We didn't know what it was at the time. But, so real quick, so very important, have an emergency plan for your family, because from when my kiddo was, he was 2.5 when I graduated the academy, and from a wee lad, he knew, jump out the window, crawl on the floor, get out of the house, and go down to the neighbors. That saved his life in that fire, and because he did exactly what he was supposed to do. And so he got out. He was fine. My wife and my daughter. My wife was at work. My daughter was at after-school care. Nobody was hurt. We lost everything. It was one of those things. Nobody was hurt, but it was really the best thing. I will dare to say, the best thing that ever happened to us.
That's hard for most people to accept, because wasn't this right before Christmas?
It was 2 weeks before Christmas. And so this did a couple things. And so I'm a born again Christian saved by Jesus Christ. And I firmly believe that the Lord grabbed a hold of my shirt collar and shook me around and said, listen, you're not focusing on the right things. You're too worried about this job. You need to be worried about your family. And so the Lord, in his great plan, took over all the physical stuff that I was chasing, and we buckled down, focused on the family. So that made our family stronger and closer. The relationship with my kids got better. The relationship with my wife got better. And that really restored my faith in humanity, because as police officers of any kind, you can get jaded very quickly seeing the worst and that society has to offer. People hurting each other, killing each other, et cetera, et cetera.
Seeing everybody on their worst day.
Yes. And so, but what I saw was my community, just come around. We have a very, it's a very rural county, like I said, but my community came together and just showered us with love and blessings. that just was unreal, something I've never expected. I expect and I'm used to serving and, serving my fellow man. I got served at that time. And so the kiddos' Christmas was taken care of. The county, churches, sheriff's departments, parks and wildlife, all the local agencies, they donated lots of money. Insurance came together well. And so we landed back on our feet, dare I say, better off than we started. Like I said, the relationship with my kids are great. This job, we're on call 24 hours a day. We have days off, but they're mere suggestions. And so that's why, especially during hunting season. So, it is a great job. We don't work a shift. As long as we log 40 hours a week, that's what we're expected. But, I miss birthdays. I miss Christmas. My wife's birthday is on July 4th. Well, that's a very busy boating holiday, so I'm never home on her birthday. So busy chasing that thrill, chasing the adrenaline, I guess. That wasn't what I needed. And so the family at home enabled me to do that. And so my turn, I turned around and started focusing on them after that fire. And life's pretty great.
Scott, do you recommend a fish and wildlife job to a cop who's maybe looking for a change of pace?
It is a wonderful change of pace. I don't want anybody to think it's not law enforcement, because it is. You're by yourself in situations and settings, and backups could be anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes away. 30 minutes is my case in a lot of situations. And if I'm on the water, there's not anybody getting to me, at that point. But as I said earlier, and when we were talking, just because you've seen a game warden doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. Like, I walked into a deer camp, I get to see moms and dads and their kiddos, like with shooting a kiddo's first animal or catching the first fish, or, hey, we're, with doing their first camping trip, example. And so we get to see a lot, and we do a lot of education and outreach with that. And, it's not your typical law enforcement. And so that is, if you're looking for a change of pace, that'd be a wonderful, wonderful way to see some good of humanity and not just that.
That's excellent. Scott, thank you so much. You did a fantastic job, and I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you so much.
I love Scott's story, both the way that he serves his community and the course correction that he had after that house fire. These are the reasons I wanted you to hear from him. I want you to know that there are law enforcement jobs out there that might be a good change of pace for you if you need that. I also wanted you to hear from someone who had everything suddenly taken away from him and was better for it afterward. There's a lot to think about with Scott's story, and there will be days ahead where it might be worth going back and listening to him again. On the next episode of Hey, Chaplain.
People talking doesn't hurt you. It doesn't matter. It's like a heckler. If you let that person impact you on stage, now the whole focus of what you're doing goes to them, and you don't acknowledge them unless they're simply out of control. But everybody else is still having a good time, and most of those people don't even recognize that person is saying something, especially if they're right up front. The rest of the audience is completely unaware. So just go right over the top of them. It's the same thing about being a cop. Go right over the top of them. We choose to let people draw us in. So I've learned a lot, and comedy has also helped me recognize where I've been successful in my career as a law enforcement officer, but it makes me feel good about myself that I'm able to use some of those things back in comedy as well to, provide a better show and entertain at a higher level.
The views expressed here are the personal views of the host and our guest and do not necessarily represent the views of any law enforcement agency or its components. Although I suspect that the white-tailed deer may have paid Scott to speak so highly of them. If you like this episode, please share it with a cop or someone who loves a cop. Thank you for listening to Hey Chaplain, and as always, pray for peace in our city.